From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on choices. Today's episode is the second of a series of seven podcast episodes on one of my new books called Achieve: Maximize Your Potential with 7 Keys to Unlock Success and Significance. And each of the episode of the series is focusing on a different characteristic that really helps us unlock success in life. And today's episode is really focusing on choices. And choices define who we are and where we're going. Choices define our life. The problem is that we don't always think about the choices that we are making. Choices define how we go, the direction how we grow. Choices define how we can give, and choices define how we live. But there again, we've got to be intentional about the choices that we're making. My very, very, very favorite quote on choices is by Eleanor Roosevelt. And she says, "I am who I am today because of choices that I made yesterday." And I really love that because when I stop to look back at choices that I've made in the past, it's easy to see now if they were very good choices or maybe they weren't so great choices. And I've certainly done my share of those. But if the choices that I made in the past determine who I am today, then that means the choices that I make today are going to affect who I am tomorrow. Success doesn't depend on our circumstances in life, but it depends on the choices that we make. And our choices affect our life tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years from now. Sometimes we just don't even realize it. Now, the big ones that we often think about are choices like a career move or a career choice or where to work or who to get married to or whether we get married at all. And it's easy to see how those choices affect us. But it's just as important to make the right little choices because those little choices, they don't feel like a big deal in the moment, but they compound over time. I was teaching a class just this morning and I talked about this. It's usually not the glamorous decisions that define us. It's those small decisions that we make, and they don't always feel like big or important decisions, but that's really where we define who we're going to be in those small moment to moment choices. I talked about the choice that we in the first podcast in this series. I talked about the choice we make with respect to our attitude, but you got to think about all of the choices that we unconsciously or consciously make throughout our day. And a lot of times we kind of create habits in our life to minimize the decisions that we have to make. And there's nothing wrong with that. We certainly can't make it a life decision every time we get up in the morning and decide what to put on. We kind of have created a style and created a habit of how we do a lot of things. Where you put your car keys is a habit. And so you don't really want to stop and think about that. That's not a big life-changing decision. That's not the choices I'm talking about. But the choices that we do need to be intentional about are the choices that create good habits or create bad habits. The choices that do or don't serve us. Our behavior is a product of our conscious choices based on our values. And when we make decisions and choices based on those values, we know we are working towards success in our lives. Time is a big decision for us. How do we spend our time? The thing about time is you can't get any more of it. You can't really save it. You can't buy any of it. You can't just pop down to the store when you run out of time and buy more. And yet so many of us aren't intentional about how we are using our time. We can use our time any way we want to, but we only get to use it once, and we're either wasting it or we're investing it. But those are the kind of choices I'm talking about, and a lot of times we're just not intentional about it. Anything or anyone that's not helping you move forward in the direction that you want to go could be considered toxic. Now, that doesn't mean they're bad people or that they're bad things, but they're not necessarily in alignment with where you're going. And so I'm really talking about making those choices based on your values that will help you stay in alignment. Now, good choices lead to good consequences, and bad choices lead to bad consequences. Um, we see this, and a lot of times we tell our children, don't hang out with the wrong friends. They might influence you. And it's easy to see that when it's our children, but sometimes it's choosing for ourselves who and what are we allowing to influence us and our decisions on how we spend our time, how we spend our money. So, but choices really do define how we grow. And sometimes we learn more from the bad choices. There's a quote that I love, and I can't remember who says it, that says, wisdom comes from good judgment. Well, good judgment comes from bad judgment, because we sometimes we make the wrong choice, and that's a learning lesson. And if we learn the lesson, that can be a good thing. I remember years ago, I was responsible for the hiring decisions in an office where I was working. I was the manager, and the front desk reception was open. And we needed someone immediately to answer the phones, because the phone rang off the hook all the time. And we needed somebody immediately to fill the position. And finding someone um, who was qualified, who could just step into the job right away, was always a challenge. And so we used a temp to hire model with a staffing agency. So they would send over a temporary person to fill the job. And if they worked out, we would hire them full time. So I sent over a request, and they sent 2 applicants over. One lady just did not have the computer skills that was necessary, and the other lady, I'm going to call her Janet, that's not her name, but I'm going to call her Janet. And I interviewed her, and she didn't have a really strong resume, but she had some computer experience, and she kind of seemed pretty easygoing and good natured. And I knew I needed to fill the position, and deep down, I knew that she probably wasn't the best fit for that fast-paced front desk job, because things were happening quick and moving a lot of patients through. And Janet seemed really nice, but she didn't seem like she had the drive to handle phones ringing off the hook and patients all the time, and all of the things that had to happen quickly. But I felt like, man, I just need somebody to fill this position, and I made a choice that I regretted later. I told her she had the job. I hired her. And by the end of the week, I knew I'd made a mistake. She had a great attitude. She was positive and willing to learn, and she was smiling and cheerful right up until we turned the phone on and opened the door in the office. She just couldn't handle the pressure of a nonstop ringing phone and checking in patients and getting all the paperwork and the details done. She could do any of those things, but not at the pace that we needed to in a busy office. And mistakes in that environment, particularly when you're dealing with people and healthcare, those are costly mistakes. And pretty quick, I knew that I'd made a big one, because I'd made a poor selection in filling the position immediately. Now, regretfully, I had to terminate her. And I feel, I feel some responsibility to that, because, if nothing else, I wasted her time, and certainly slowed down getting the right person in the job. But my point here is that we will make bad choices sometimes, but we can reflect on them and learn the lesson. And so the next time I got ready to hire somebody, I realized, you know what, I need to be more careful about this, because that's what happened last time. I ended up costing Janet some time, and I ended up costing the company some money, and hiring another person and retraining. And so, reflecting on poor choices is difficult because we don't really like to look back and say, oh, I did something wrong or I made a mistake. But those can be the best lessons because they help us make better choices in the future. We first make our choices and then our choices make us. So start by thinking about just the little things, choosing our thoughts, choosing our habits. Bruce Barton pointed out that sometimes when I consider what tremendous consequences come from little things, I'm tempted to think there are no little things. And that's so true because the little things can become big things over time. But our choices absolutely are so important. And there again, we just have to be intentional about it. Fill your calendar and your schedule and your life based on your priorities and say yes to those things and say no to other things. If your priority is to be a better parent, then be the best parent that you can and make the choices that will help you be the best person in that role that you can. If you're a stay-at-home mom, then embrace that and say, what do I need to do to be better at this? How can I step more fully into that role? If your priority is to be a better manager or a better leader, then say yes to growth and leadership development that will help you in that area. If you value becoming a leader in your church, then say yes to the opportunities that help you develop influence with other church members. What you say yes to defines your life, and what you say no to can often define your legacy. Because we have to say no to some good things sometimes in order to say yes to the right, great things that are most important. Now, telling people no isn't easy. And I struggled with this for a long time. I just really hate to tell people no. I really do. But people will respect that you have priorities and you aren't willing to compromise on them. So share that, thank you for thinking of me, but this is not in alignment. It's not the best choice for me based on where I'm going at the moment. Saying no to the wrong things will create the space to say yes to the right things in your life. Saying yes to everything is going to derail you because we can't do everything. We are limited in terms of time and resources. So, my challenge to you today relative to choices, particularly as we're coming to the end of the year, this is a great time to sit down and reflect on your commitments that you have in your life and your calendar and you know find the freedom to say no to some things. I was talking with a lady just yesterday, and we were talking about the holidays coming up, and she said something interesting. She said, oh, I had shared with her that I was feeling a little bit of a need to decrease some commitments in my life in the next year. And she said, you know what, that I love that. And she said, I am that person who I just really absolutely refuse to become overcommitted and too busy. She said life is too short, and she has two young sons, and they're just a joy. And I love that because as I was talking with her, she was resonating. She's like, you know what? I don't even make those commitments because I refuse to become overscheduled and overstressed. And, I'm that person that I love to say yes to everything. So I have to be very intentional about not overscheduling and saying no. And, there again, it's hard to tell people no gracefully. But the more that we do that, the more space we create in our life to say yes to the good things. So sit down at the end of the year in the next few weeks and evaluate your commitments and your calendar, and remember why you're saying yes to the things you're saying yes to. If your kids are in every gymnastics and dance and music program that they can possibly be enrolled in, and you find yourself constantly shuttling them from one activity to another, you may find that number one, you're stressed out and exhausted, but they might be stressed out and exhausted. So maybe it's reflecting on that and saying, next year we're just going to pick one for a few months and see how that goes. Maybe it's decreasing the opportunities that you say yes to. Maybe it's evaluating the commitments you make on volunteering. These don't have to be bad things. They just maybe aren't in alignment with where you want to go. But the choices that you're making relative to how you spend your time is going to determine, what the return is overall. So a couple of things to think about when you think about the return on your investment of time. You're on the right track when you can say yes to some of these questions relative to that commitment or to that choice. You feel fulfilled while giving in that area. You're passionate about what you're doing. You don't worry about getting paid for what you're doing. You look forward to opportunities to invest time in this way. And it doesn't leave you completely drained or exhausted. It's something only you can do for someone. Maybe it's something that helps you grow, or it leverages your natural strengths and abilities. Now, you may not say yes to all of those things in relative to any one commitment, but think about those. Carefully consider, sit down and look at your past week or your past couple of weeks and go, where did my time go? And are there activities in my life that I need to stop doing? Are there activities in my life that I want to continue doing? And then are there activities in my life that I need or want to start doing? But find what you need to cut out first, because that's going to give you the space to say yes to some other things in life. And there again, our choices here, what we say yes to shapes our life, but what we say no to can give us the place to create our legacy, the impact that we're going to make. So saying yes to the good things, the great things, and saying no to the okay things. It's trimming away the excess. And sometimes that can be incredibly powerful, incredibly freeing, because it gives us more. It gives us more. It gives us more time. It gives us more energy. It gives us more room, more space. It's kind of like decluttering, making the choices that you need to make to declutter and just really simplifying. And it can be powerful. So really good thing to think about, especially with the new year coming up. Run out and get that planner that you have been thinking about. If that helps you, if that's a choice and a tool that will help you be more intentional, then it's an investment. There's so many different ways to do that, but figure out the one or two things that you want to cut down on, and then, what do I need to continue doing, and what do I want to start doing to have a better, more intentionally me. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.